Do you ever think about those everyday things from the 1980s that shaped your childhood so completely, yet somehow slipped from memory the moment the decade ended? These 50 forgotten pieces of the 80s were everywhere once, woven into routines, classrooms, and living rooms. So what did we leave behind without even noticing? 2009, Nestlé Toll House cookie dough, something nearly every American household trusted, became the center of a national panic. For decades, people could not resist sneaking a spoonful straight from the mixing bowl. It was childhood rebellion in its sweetest form, a taste of doughy, buttery comfort. But that year, hospitals began linking a mysterious wave of E. coli infections to unbaked Toll House dough. Investigators traced the bacteria to contaminated flour and eggs, something no one ever thought twice about. The news spread fast, and families across the country threw away tubs of dough from their refrigerators. It was a moment of disbelief. How could something so innocent, so normal, become dangerous? The recall changed food laws forever. New reformulation rules required pasteurization and clear warnings against eating raw dough, ending an era of guilty pleasure. Nestlé later reintroduced a safer version, but it never quite felt the same. People began to bake their cookies all the way through, no longer daring to take that secret taste. Still, the memory of licking the spoon while baking with family lingers for millions, a reminder that nostalgia often hides in the smallest, simplest moments. And sometimes those moments vanish overnight, not because we outgrow them, but because safety finally caught up to sweetness. Homemade extension cord octopus plugs for tree lights were one of those wildly creative, wildly unsafe tricks families used without hesitation in the 1970s. You would see a single outlet powering an entire forest of cords behind the tree, all tangled together like someone tried to knit with electricity. These improvised clusters allowed families to plug in the lights, the rotating tree stand, the music box, and maybe even an extra lamp or two. No one worried about overheating or sparks or overloaded circuits. It was simply the only way to make everything work with the limited outlets older homes had. People trusted their instincts, not safety manuals. Today, though, building or using something like that is a clear violation of electrical codes. You can be fined, cited, or required to remove them immediately. Modern power strips have surge protection. Trichloroethylene cleaned ornament sets filled store shelves in the 1980s, their gleaming surfaces reflecting the promise of perfect holiday displays. Manufacturers used this powerful industrial solvent to remove oils and residue from mass-produced ornaments before packaging, leaving that flawless shine customers expected. Families unpacked boxes each December, handling pieces that still carried traces of the cleaning chemical in tiny surface imperfections. The solvent evaporated slowly at room temperature, releasing fumes that accumulated in closed storage boxes and drifted into living rooms once ornaments hung on heated trees. Children who helped unpack decorations breathed concentrated vapors from freshly opened boxes without recognizing the smell as dangerous. Parents arranged these gleaming spheres on branches, never suspecting the perfect shine came with invisible health costs. When researchers linked trichloroethylene to liver damage and cancer, manufacturers switched to safer methods. The pristine ornaments that represented holiday perfection became examples of how industrial shortcuts entered family homes. Brand chips in oversized bags appeared at every holiday gathering where feeding a crowd mattered more than impressing anyone with fancy logos or recognizable packaging. The bags were enormous, puffed with air and filled with rippled or plain potato chips that tasted almost identical to the famous brands, but cost half as much at the register. Parents poured them into serving bowls without the original packaging visible anywhere nearby, and guests reached for handfuls without ever asking where they came from or noticing any difference. The crunch was right, the salt was right, and the satisfaction was exactly what people expected from chips at a party. Kids grabbed fistfuls during holiday movie marathons, leaving greasy fingerprints on remote controls and couch cushions without a care in the world. The bags lasted longer than name brands because there was simply more product inside, and leftovers stayed fresh enough in the pantry for days afterward. Nobody bragged about buying off-brand chips, but nobody apologized for them either. They did exactly what they were supposed to do, filling bowls and filling bellies while leaving money in the budget for things that mattered more to the family. Canned MSG-laden soup mixes were the backbone of 1980s casseroles, stews, and potluck dinners. Every home cook had a few packets stashed away, ready to transform boring chicken into culinary magic. "Just add water," the boxes said, and families did, by the millions. The flavor was bold, addictive, and unmistakably artificial. Then came the MSG scare, a flood of reports blaming monosodium glutamate for headaches, fatigue, and Chinese restaurant syndrome. Overnight, something that once meant flavor now meant fear. MSG became public enemy number one thanks to sensational headlines and questionable studies. Suddenly, housewives who'd spent years cooking with it were tossing it in the trash. Even companies that knew the science was shaky jumped ship to avoid backlash. Manufacturers scrambled to hide it under new names like hydrolyzed protein. Supermarkets purged shelves and recipe books quietly rewrote themselves. The craze for all-natural cooking that followed changed the way America seasoned its food forever. By the 1990s, MSG's reputation was unfairly destroyed, though science later found little evidence of harm. Still, those old packets disappeared for good, taking with them a flavor so intense it almost made you forget what real food tasted like. Pre-packed calamus-flavored bitters and tonics added a distinctive spicy sweetness to cocktails, digestive remedies, and herbal preparations throughout the 1980s. The root extract had been prized for centuries in traditional medicine and flavoring, lending complexity to drinks that bartenders and home mixologists crafted with pride. People sipped these bitters believing they aided digestion, settled stomachs, and provided medicinal benefits that justified their sharp, aromatic taste. The bottles sat behind bars and in medicine cabinets, their contents trusted as both flavorful and functional. But calamus contains a compound called beta-acerone, which researchers identified as a carcinogen capable of causing tumors in laboratory studies. When regulators examined the evidence, they banned calamus from food and beverage use entirely, removing an ingredient that had flavored drinks for generations. Bartenders reformulated classic recipes, and herbal remedy makers found alternatives that provided similar flavors without the cancer risk. Those old bottles of bitters now serve as reminders that even ingredients with centuries of traditional use can harbor dangers that only modern science could reveal. Driving home walkers as the perfect gift for new parents were advertised throughout the 1980s as developmental miracles that would help infants learn to walk faster and more confidently. Grandparents bought them proudly, imagining their newest family members zooming across living room floors with delighted giggles. The contraptions looked sturdy enough, with plastic seats suspended inside wheeled frames that let babies push themselves around before they could stand. What nobody anticipated was the speed these walkers could reach on smooth surfaces or the momentum they built heading toward staircases and open doorways. Babies toppled downstairs, still strapped into their seats, crashed into furniture hard enough to cause head injuries, and reached countertops where hot liquids waited. Emergency rooms documented thousands of injuries each year, many severe enough to require hospitalization. Parents who thought they were giving their children an advantage were instead introducing one of the most dangerous pieces of baby equipment ever mass-produced. When studies finally confirmed what hospitals had been seeing, regulations tightened and designs changed dramatically. PCB-containing light-set transformers hummed quietly beneath Christmas trees in the 1980s, powering elaborate blinking patterns that made decorations feel alive and magical. Families plugged in multiple light strings, relying on small transformer boxes to regulate electricity and create the twinkling sequences everyone loved. The boxes sat on carpets, tucked behind tree stands, sometimes buried under presents where children crawled and played. Inside those unassuming plastic cases was oil containing polychlorinated biphenyls, industrial coolants that prevented overheating during long hours of operation. When transformers aged, cracked, or overheated, the PCB oil could leak onto floors, carpets, and hands of anyone who touched them. Families cleaned up mysterious oily residue without realizing they were spreading contamination that would linger for years. Studies eventually linked PCB exposure to cancer and neurological damage, prompting regulators to ban the compounds from consumer products. The little boxes that powered holiday magic became toxic relics requiring careful disposal. The twinkling lights they powered came with costs nobody understood until decades later. Asian vanilla extract sat on spice racks in small brown bottles that looked almost identical to the real thing, fooling no one who knew the difference but saving dollars that mattered more than flavor. The liquid inside smelled sweeter, sharper, and somehow less warm than pure vanilla, but it disappeared into cookie dough and cake batter without anyone at the table ever noticing. Mothers who baked through the holidays used it generously, knowing that the cookies would still vanish and the cakes would still earn compliments regardless of what the bottle actually contained. Real vanilla was expensive, a luxury reserved for people who did not have to check prices before dropping something into the cart. Imitation vanilla was the quiet compromise, the ingredient that let holiday traditions continue without breaking the budget. Kids licked spoons coated in batter and never questioned the source of the sweetness. The cookies came out golden, the frosting tasted rich, and the memories formed around kitchen tables where the smell of baking filled every room. Nobody cared whether the vanilla was real as long as the love behind it was unmistakable. Chocolate bars were the ultimate 1980s hustle food. These candy bars weren't for kids. They were for stressed-out adults chasing deadlines and dreams. "The sweet that keeps you going," the ads boasted, blending the comfort of chocolate with the rush of caffeine. It sounded genius until people realized they were basically eating 2 cups of coffee wrapped in sugar. The first bite tasted like victory. The second tasted like regret. People would crash hard within hours, jittery and exhausted. Some companies even marketed them to students, sparking outrage among parents and health officials alike. Each bar packed so much caffeine that your heart raced before you finished unwrapping it. Office workers swore by them. Doctors swore at them. The FDA quickly stepped in after reports of jittery customers and sleepless nights began piling up. For a while, they were everywhere, near cash registers, in vending machines, even next to energy pills at gas stations. The bars promised focus, energy, and alertness, but what they really delivered was anxiety and regret. By the end of the decade, stricter caffeine limits made them illegal to sell in grocery aisles. Today, they're remembered as the candy that tried to do too much. Dessert, coffee, and chaos, all in one bite. Squeeze. Hexachlorobenzene, treated grain products, made their way into bread, cereal, and pasta throughout the 1980s after the fungicide was used to protect wheat and other crops from disease during storage. Farmers valued its effectiveness against seed-borne infections that could devastate entire harvests, and processors assumed residues would be negligible by the time grains reached consumers. Families ate these products daily, building meals around bread, pasta, and breakfast cereals without any awareness of what chemicals might linger inside. The fungicide seemed like a necessary tool in modern agriculture, protecting the food supply from threats that had plagued farmers for generations. But hexachlorobenzene proved far more persistent and dangerous than anyone initially believed. Mass poisoning events in other countries had already demonstrated its devastating effects on human health, causing liver damage, skin lesions, and neurological problems. When regulators finally connected these risks to agricultural use, the chemical was banned globally. The grains that once seemed like simple staples carried contamination that took decades to fully understand and eliminate from the food chain. Sacks without safety enclosures were the backyard centerpieces that every child in the 1980s dreamed of finding assembled and waiting on Christmas morning. These bouncing platforms promised endless entertainment, higher jumps than any bed could provide, and the thrill of momentary weightlessness that made ordinary afternoons feel like carnivals. Families set them up on grass, concrete, and uneven ground without much thought about what surrounded the jumping surface or what might happen when someone bounced too close to the edge. Children flew off in every direction, landing on hard ground, garden furniture, and each other with impacts that shattered bones and rattled skulls. Multiple jumpers created chaos as smaller children launched unexpectedly when larger ones landed nearby. The springs themselves became hazards. pinching fingers and catching feet between coils that had no padding or protection. Parents watched from kitchen windows, assuming that the fun outweighed whatever minor risks existed, never realizing that trampolines would become one of the leading causes of childhood fractures. The enclosures and padding that seem standard today were luxuries that most families never considered necessary. Electric blanket. Chloroform-based snow globe fluid swirled inside countless decorative globes that sat on mantels and shelves in 1980s homes, their miniature winter scenes captivating children who shook them endlessly. The tiny snowflakes drifted with perfect slowness because the liquid inside was denser than water, creating that dreamy effect everyone associated with holiday magic. Kids pressed their faces close to the glass, watching the flakes settle around tiny Santas, snowmen, and village scenes, while parents smiled at their wonder. What nobody knew was that some manufacturers used chloroform-based mixtures to achieve that ideal snow-falling effect, chemicals that could cause serious harm if globes cracked or shattered. Children who dropped globes and helped clean up the spilled liquid absorbed the compound through skin, while vapors entered lungs before anyone realized cleanup required more than paper towels. When product safety testing revealed the toxic contents, manufacturers switched to safer glycol-based fluids. The enchanting globes that once symbolized peaceful winter scenes became reminders that beauty sometimes floats in dangerous solutions. Chromated ice cream in the rectangular cardboard tub sat in freezers as the affordable treat that made holiday desserts possible without emptying the grocery budget. The tub was plain, printed with simple stripes or generic designs that made no attempt to compete with the fancy containers nearby. Inside, the ice cream was slightly icier than premium brands, slightly less creamy, but still cold and sweet, and exactly what everyone wanted after a big meal. Parents scooped it over warm pie, alongside cake, or straight into bowls for kids who had earned something sweet for finishing their vegetables. The flavors were basic, usually vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry, but they paired with everything and complained about nothing. The cardboard tub often found a second life in the freezer, refilled with homemade soup or used to store leftovers until someone remembered to throw it away. Nobody mistook it for gourmet, but nobody expected gourmet either. The ice cream did its job quietly and consistently, melting into memories that had nothing to do with brand names and everything to do with family gathered around the table. Tab soda was the drink that defined a decade, and then paid the price for it. Introduced by Coca-Cola for calorie-conscious drinkers, it came in that unmistakable pink can with a promise: zero sugar, zero guilt, all taste. The secret weapon? Saccharin. A sweetener that seemed like a miracle until science caught up. When studies linked saccharin to cancer in lab animals, panic spread faster than fizz. Health warnings appeared on cans, and sales plummeted as consumers fled from what suddenly felt like a soda-sized science experiment. Despite the controversy, Tab hung on as a cultural icon, the drink of fashion models, aerobics instructors, and anyone chasing the new body craze of the 1980s. But by the 2000s, Coca-Cola quietly pulled the plug. The soda that once symbolized empowerment had become an outdated reminder of a risk people no longer wanted to sip. In the end, Tab wasn't just a drink, it was a time capsule of a decade obsessed with control, beauty, and the illusion of safety. Plated dishware once sat proudly on dinner tables across the nation, decorated with bright reds, yellows, and oranges that made every meal feel a little more cheerful. Grandparents loved these plates because they were sturdy, vibrant, and sold everywhere from department stores to small local shops. Families used them daily for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, never imagining that something so colorful could carry such a serious threat. Back then, bright colors meant quality and charm, not danger, but cadmium does not stay locked inside ceramic glaze. Over time, especially when exposed to acids from food, the metal can leach out and seep directly into whatever is being eaten. Researchers eventually discovered that cadmium exposure could damage kidneys, weaken bones, and cause long-term health issues, even at low levels. This revelation shocked families who had relied on these plates for years. Regulators quickly moved to ban cadmium in dishware, forcing manufacturers to overhaul their production methods. Many people packed away their old sets, uncertain whether it was safe to keep them even as decorations. The contrast between the cheerful appearance and the hidden danger made these dishes one of the more unsettling household discoveries of the era. Today, they serve as a reminder that beauty and safety do not always go hand in hand, especially in a time when fewer regulations existed to protect everyday families. After the clacker balls as the must-have stocking stuffer were a sensation that swept through the 1980s with the kind of intensity only toys can generate. These acrylic spheres, attached by a string and meant to bang together in a hypnotic rhythm, showed up under Christmas trees in homes that had no idea what chaos they were unwrapping. Kids loved the satisfying crack of the balls colliding, the way mastering the rhythm felt like unlocking a secret skill. What nobody anticipated was the force those collisions produced. The acrylic shattered without warning, sending sharp fragments flying toward faces and hands that had been swinging the toy moments before. Emergency rooms filled with children clutching bleeding fingers and crying about their favorite gift. Parents who thought they were giving harmless fun found themselves rushing to hospitals on Christmas afternoon. Manufacturers tried reinforcing the design, but complaints kept coming, and the toy disappeared from shelves almost as quickly as it had arrived. Today, clacker balls are remembered with nostalgia and disbelief, a reminder that exciting gifts are not always safe ones. Indoor lead-soldered stained glass tree toppers crowned Christmas trees in the 1980s with handcrafted elegance that mass-produced plastic stars could never match. Families treasured these delicate pieces, often receiving them as wedding gifts or inheriting them from grandparents who valued artisan craftsmanship. The colored glass caught tree lights beautifully, casting rainbow patterns across ceilings and walls while everyone gathered below to exchange presents. What made these toppers so structurally sound was the lead solder holding each piece of glass together, applied by craftspeople who worked without gloves or ventilation. Every time someone placed the topper on the tree, adjusted its position, or packed it away, tiny particles of lead transferred onto hands that later touched faces and food. Children lifted onto shoulders to place the star were exposed directly, their small fingers gripping the metal seams without anyone imagining the danger. When health authorities documented lead's devastating effects on developing brains, these handcrafted treasures became hazardous heirlooms. The artistry that once elevated holiday decorating now carries warnings about handling and display. Nitrogreen instead of real butter sat in refrigerators across the country, yellow and soft inside its plastic tub, ready to spread on toast or melt into holiday recipes without complaint. The tub itself was practical, reusable, and destined for a second life, holding leftovers or crayons long after the margarine was gone. Families who bought it rarely mentioned the switch, and most kids never questioned why their bread tasted slightly different from what they ate at a friend's house. Butter was expensive, and margarine offered a workaround that almost no one discussed openly. It spread easier straight from the fridge, which mothers appreciated during busy mornings, and it disappeared into mashed potatoes and baked goods without leaving a trace of guilt. Some grandparents refused to touch it, insisting that butter was the only proper choice, but budgets did not always allow for tradition. The margarine sat quietly beside the eggs and milk, never demanding attention, never pretending to be something it was not. And over time, it became just as familiar as anything else in the kitchen. Kids grew up spreading it on biscuits and never thought twice about what they might have been missing. Government tampons by Procter & Gamble were a triumph of marketing and a tragedy of science. Sold in grocery aisles and advertised as revolutionary, they promised unmatched absorbency through their unique super sponge design. For a while, they were hailed as a breakthrough in women's health. But in 1980, the dream turned deadly. The synthetic fibers used in Rely tampons were linked to toxic shock syndrome, a bacterial infection that proved fatal for dozens of women. The product's sponge-like material, designed to trap more moisture, also created the perfect environment for bacteria to grow. Doctors quickly raised alarms, but Procter & Gamble's marketing machine was faster than the science. It took a national outcry, and mounting deaths for the truth to finally hit the shelves. The recall was swift, the outrage faster, and the damage permanent. Rely disappeared from stores almost overnight, but the incident changed the entire industry. New safety standards, labeling laws, and medical research came directly from the disaster. It was a haunting reminder that even innovation can go horribly wrong when profit outpaces precaution. For a generation of shoppers, Rely wasn't just a brand. It was a warning stamped in fine print. High Aquadots were a toy that promised endless creativity with just a few drops of water, but they became infamous for an entirely different reason. The tiny, colorful beads could be arranged into shapes and designs, and when sprayed with water, they stuck together magically. Kids loved how simple and satisfying it was. Many children turned their kitchen tables into art studios, proudly crafting hearts, stars, and animals that shimmered like candy. The bright colors and glossy texture made them irresistible, even to toddlers who were too young to play safely. Parents praised the toys' creativity at first, never imagining that the harmless beads could turn into something so dangerous. But soon after their release, reports emerged that children were falling sick after swallowing the beads. Tests revealed that the coating contained a compound that turned toxic inside the body, producing a chemical similar to a date-rape drug. Panic spread quickly among parents, and the product was pulled from store shelves worldwide. For many families, it was a wake-up call about how even the most innocent-looking toy could hide a sinister danger. The recall was massive, and Aquadots became a symbol of the dark side of 1980s-style creativity, colorful, exciting, and completely reckless. What was meant to be an art toy ended up in the history books as one of the most shocking product failures of the decade. Christmas morning started before the sun came up. You opened your eyes at 5 a.m., heart pounding, adrenaline surging. You crept to your sibling's room. You whispered, "Are you awake?" They were. Everyone was. You tiptoed to the top of the stairs. You peeked. And then came the voice from your parents' room. "Go back to bed." Those 4 words were torture. You were so close. The tree was right there. The presents were waiting. But the rule was the rule. No presents until everyone was awake. And awake meant your parents had coffee and at least one functioning eye open. You waited. You counted ceiling tiles. You tried to fall back asleep and failed completely. Sometimes you played a game. Guess what's in each box based on shape and weight. Sometimes you just stared at the clock, watching the minutes crawl like hours. When the signal finally came, "Okay, you can come down," you launched yourself down the stairs like a rocket. That moment, that first glimpse of everything under the tree, was the whole point. You only got that feeling once a year, and nothing since has ever quite matched it. Using PVC blow mold yard figures with toxic plasticizers stood proudly on lawns throughout the 1980s, their cheerful Santas and snowmen glowing from internal bulbs that made neighborhoods feel magical after dark. Families collected them over years, adding new figures each season until entire yards became illuminated winter wonderlands. Children loved running between them, touching their smooth plastic surfaces and peering inside at the warm orange glow of incandescent bulbs. These figures were made from polyvinyl chloride softened with plasticizers that made the material flexible enough to mold into complex shapes. Under summer storage heat and winter bulb warmth, those plasticizers slowly migrated to the surface and released fumes that drifted across yards where families gathered. The chemicals responsible for making the plastic pliable were later linked to hormone disruption, especially troubling for children who spent hours playing near the glowing figures. When regulations tightened around these compounds, manufacturers scrambled to reformulate. The beloved yard decorations that defined neighborhood holiday spirit became symbols of an era that prioritized appearance over safety. Canned tuna packed in water became the protein of choice when fresh meat felt like an impossible luxury during the holiday season. The small cans stacked easily in the pantry, waiting to be drained, flaked, and mixed into casseroles, sandwiches, or cold salads that stretched a single can into multiple servings for the family. Kids ate tuna melts on toast, tuna noodle casserole with crushed potato chips on top, and cold tuna salad scooped onto saltine crackers when something quick was needed between holiday chaos. The smell was unmistakable, filling the kitchen the moment the can opener bit into the metal lid. But families learned to love it because it meant dinner was coming together fast. Parents appreciated how affordable it was compared to chicken or beef, and how the protein content made it a respectable centerpiece for budget meals. Mixed with mayonnaise, celery, and a little salt, it transformed into something almost elegant when served on a bed of lettuce or tucked between slices of soft bread. Canned tuna fed families without apology, proving that humble ingredients could still create meals worth remembering fondly. Aspartame heavy diet drinks ruled the 1980s like artificial royalty. Every company wanted in on the low-calorie craze, and aspartame was the magic word, sweeter than sugar, with zero guilt. But behind the fizzy slogans and pastel cans was a growing storm of controversy. The commercials made it look glamorous, thin models sipping soda on beaches and boardwalks, living proof that chemistry could be chic. But reports of strange side effects, headaches, nausea, dizziness, began to spread. Health watchdogs accused companies of putting profit before safety, and suddenly, 0 calories didn't sound so refreshing. Reports of headaches, dizziness, and long-term health concerns turned the miracle sweetener into a national debate. Diet sodas that once promised vitality suddenly felt toxic, their ingredients lists sounding more like chemistry homework than refreshment. Regulators scrambled, companies reformulated, and loyal fans were left wondering if their favorite drinks were safe or secretly sinister. By the end of the decade, aspartame was under tighter scrutiny, forcing soda makers to reinvent themselves again. For those who remember the first wave of diet drinks, it was an era defined by blind faith in science and the rude awakening that followed. 3D Doritos. Community bonfires using unregulated materials were another festive tradition that belonged to a different world entirely. You would see families tossing in scraps of old fencing, broken furniture, untreated wood, and sometimes even boxes or paper left over from the holiday madness. The bonfire would roar to life, sending sparks spiraling into the winter air like fireflies trying to escape the heat. People gathered around with warm drinks, shared stories, and treated it as a way to come together when the weather tried to push everyone apart. Nobody checked whether the materials were safe to burn. Nobody asked about air quality. It was simply a tradition born from practicality and a desire to be together. Today, though, burning anything other than clean, approved wood is illegal. Environmental regulations forbid the release of toxic fumes, and burning household materials can result in fines or even legal action. It is a reminder that the world has grown more cautious and more regulated. But the memory of standing around a roaring fire, bundled up and laughing with neighbors, is something no law can erase. The easy bake oven of the 1980s, driving home. Christmas trees on car roofs without tying them properly was almost a holiday sport in the 1970s. Families would buy a tree that was always 2 feet taller than the living room allowed, hoist it onto the roof by sheer force of will, and toss 1 or 2 loops of twine over it with a confidence that probably came from nowhere rational. The wind would whip through the branches as the car pulled onto the road, and everyone inside held their breath just a little, watching for any sudden wobble. Nobody thought about fines or traffic violations or the possibility of the tree tumbling dramatically into the street. It was just part of the adventure, part of the ritual of getting that perfect pine safely home. Today, though, even slightly unsecured loads can earn you a ticket on the spot. Highways and city streets have become strict zones of compliance, leaving no room for the messy charm of trial and error. But the memory of those rides home, filled with laughter and the smell of fresh pine creeping into the car, remains untouchable. Spray-on flocking with chlorinated solvents was the secret weapon for families who wanted their Christmas trees to look freshly dusted with mountain snow. In the 1980s, parents would shake aerosol cans and coat branches, windowsills, and wreaths with white foam that dried into that perfect powdery finish. The smell was sharp and chemical, filling rooms with fumes that lingered long after decorating was done. But nobody thought twice about breathing it in. Kids watched in awe as parents transformed greenery into frosted masterpieces, sometimes helping to spray corners their parents could not reach. The chlorinated solvents inside those cans were powerful enough to simulate snow perfectly, but they also released volatile compounds that accumulated in enclosed spaces throughout the holiday season. Families sat in living rooms surrounded by freshly flocked decorations, inhaling chemicals no one imagined could cause respiratory harm. When scientists connected indoor air quality problems to these sprays, manufacturers were forced to reformulate or discontinue. The ease of creating instant winter magic came with a price nobody saw until damage was done. Vegetables for holiday side dishes lined the pantry shelves in rows of green, yellow, and pale white, their labels promising convenience and a price that fit the tightest budget. Green beans sat in water that tasted faintly metallic. Corn kernels floated in cloudy brine, and peas rolled out of the can with a softness that fresh produce could never replicate. Families heated them on the stove with a pat of margarine, a shake of salt, and the hope that presentation would carry them through dinner. Nobody mentioned that the neighbors might be serving fresh vegetables or something frozen that still held a crunch. Canned sides were dependable, affordable, and fast, which mattered more during busy holiday seasons than anyone cared to admit. Kids pushed them around their plates, bargaining for dessert and promising to eat every last bite. Parents scooped them into serving bowls that once belonged to grandmothers, treating the contents with the same care as anything homemade. And at the end of the meal, those bowls were often empty, picked clean by people who were simply grateful to have food on the table at all. Lid-soldered canned goods were a ticking time bomb hiding in plain sight. Before the late 1980s, many canned foods, soups, vegetables, meats, were sealed with solder containing actual lead. It kept cans airtight but made every bite a potential health hazard. Researchers began noticing dangerously high lead levels in children's blood, especially in communities relying heavily on canned food. Acidic products like tomato soup were the worst offenders, dissolving metal into every spoonful. What started as a production shortcut turned into a national health crisis. Scientists discovered that acidic foods like tomatoes and fruits were leaching the metal right into people's meals. Children's products were the worst offenders, turning lunch into slow poisoning. When the studies came out, the FDA had no choice but to act. The new rules outlawed lead solder in all canned goods, forcing companies to overhaul production lines. For years, however, the damage had already been done, especially overseas where regulations came later. Looking back, it's shocking how normal it once seemed to trust metal sealed with toxins. The ban was a turning point in food safety, and a sobering lesson in how progress sometimes hides poison under a label of convenience. Sodium cyclamate. Sweeteners were home. Christmas trees on car roofs without tying them properly was almost a holiday sport in the 1970s. Families would buy a tree that was always 2 feet taller than the living room allowed, hoist it onto the roof by sheer force of will, and toss 1 or 2 loops of twine over it with a confidence that probably came from nowhere rational. The wind would whip through the branches as the car pulled onto the road, and everyone inside held their breath just a little, watching for any sudden wobble. Nobody thought about fines or traffic violations or the possibility of the tree tumbling dramatically into the street. It was just part of the adventure, part of the ritual of getting that perfect pine safely home. Today, though, even slightly unsecured loads can earn you a ticket on the spot. Highways and city streets have become strict zones of compliance, leaving no room for the messy charm of trial and error. But the memory of those rides home, filled with laughter and the smell of fresh pine creeping into the car, remains untouchable. Pre-packaged Christmas specials off the television was an event that required planning, patience, and a willingness to sit beside the VCR with your finger hovering over the pause button. In the 1970s, holiday specials aired once a year, and if you missed them, you waited 12 whole months for another chance. Families gathered around the television with blank tapes ready, determined to capture every second of Rudolph, Frosty, or the Grinch before the next commercial interrupted. The person in charge of the remote became the hero of the evening, stopping the recording just before ads and resuming the moment the show returned. Most tapes ended up with bits of commercials spliced between scenes, but nobody cared. Those imperfect recordings became treasures, watched over and over until the tape wore thin and the picture started to wobble. Kids memorized every line, every song, and every pause where someone had fumbled the remote. There was pride in owning a collection of Christmas specials, even if the quality was grainy. Streaming killed that tradition entirely, making everything available instantly and removing the urgency that once made December broadcasts feel sacred. Mercury glass ornament garlands were prized possessions in 1980s households, their antique silver finish lending elegance that modern ornaments could not match. Families inherited them from grandparents or discovered them in specialty shops, stringing the delicate spheres across mantels and tree branches where they caught light with an almost liquid shimmer. The vintage look was achieved through double-walled glass with a reflective coating sealed inside, creating that distinctive mirror-like glow that made everything sparkle. What most families never knew was that older versions contained actual mercury compounds in their reflective coating. If an ornament cracked, chipped, or shattered, the toxic metal could escape into the air or onto surfaces where children played. People handled these ornaments carefully because they were fragile, never realizing gentleness was also a matter of safety. When environmental regulations tightened around mercury products, these garlands became prohibited items that families were urged to dispose of through hazardous waste programs. The elegant shimmer that elevated holiday decor now represents a generation's unknowing exposure. Electric Candle brand saltine crackers came in sleeves so long they barely fit in the cabinet, stacked neatly inside boxes that cost a fraction of the name brands sitting one shelf higher. These crackers showed up beside every bowl of soup, every slice of cheese, and every late-night snack that needed something crisp to carry it. The taste was close enough that most kids never noticed the difference, and parents appreciated how far a single box could stretch through the cold months. They crumbled into chili, floated in tomato soup, and disappeared by the handful during holiday movie nights when the family gathered in front of the television. The packaging was plain, the branding forgettable, but the function was identical to anything fancier. Families learned to stop caring about logos when the crackers tasted the same and the savings added up week after week. Some kids even preferred the store brand, though they never admitted it outside the house. Those long sleeves became a quiet constant in kitchens where budgets mattered more than appearances, proof that simplicity could fill a home just as well as anything dressed up in flashy marketing. Was the 1980s in a can, loud, rebellious, and wired beyond reason. With the tagline, "All the sugar and twice the caffeine," it became the drink of choice for gamers, students, and anyone who thought sleep was optional. The pitch was simple. If coffee was too boring and soda too weak, Jolt would fix both problems, explosively. The neon red logo, the buzz of carbonation, and the rush of caffeine turned it into a cult classic overnight. Teachers hated it, parents feared it, and kids snuck it into backpacks like contraband. Some schools even banned it entirely after students showed up jittering through math class. Jolt's ingredients list read like a dare, packed with more sugar than a candy factory and caffeine levels that made even coffee blush. For a generation raised on excess, it was perfect, until regulators and doctors began sounding alarms about caffeine overload. By the late 1990s, new rules and changing health standards pushed it off many shelves, but its legacy lives on in every modern energy drink. Jolt Cola walked so Monster and Red Bull could sprint, shaking all the way. Red ovens with exposed heating elements were the dream gift for children who wanted to feel grown up in the kitchen. And in the 1980s, they delivered that dream with very little standing between small hands and real heat. The tiny ovens used actual light bulbs to bake miniature cakes and cookies, and the warmth radiating from the openings felt like proof that something magical was happening inside. Kids reached into those narrow slots to retrieve their creations without mitts, without caution, and without any real understanding of how hot metal becomes under sustained exposure. Burns on fingers, palms, and wrists became almost expected, a rite of passage that parents accepted as part of the experience. Some children trapped their hands inside while reaching for stuck pans, and the injuries that followed went far beyond minor discomfort. Reports piled up until manufacturers had no choice but to redesign the entire concept, replacing exposed bulbs with safer heating methods that took years longer to bake anything at all. The original ovens, with their glowing orange interiors and sizzling pans, became symbols of an era that believed a few burns were simply the price of letting children learn. Angel hair spun fiberglass was the ethereal finishing touch that turned ordinary Christmas trees into something heavenly in the 1980s. Families pulled wispy strands from plastic bags and draped them carefully across branches, creating that soft, cloud-like glow that made every tree look like it belonged in a winter fairy tale. The material caught light beautifully, shimmering with an almost supernatural quality that delighted children who begged to help with decorating. Parents encouraged them to join in, watching tiny fingers stretch the delicate fibers across greenery without any idea what those strands actually contained. Angel hair was made from spun fiberglass, and every touch released microscopic shards that embedded in skin, floated into eyes, and drifted into lungs with each excited breath. Kids often complained of itchy hands or irritated eyes after decorating, symptoms parents dismissed as holiday excitement or dry winter air. When health experts finally identified the respiratory risks and skin irritation caused by these fibers, the dreamy decoration was banned. Angel hair remains a bittersweet memory of how something beautiful could leave invisible damage. Jiffy cornbread mix came in small boxes that cost almost nothing and produced golden squares of warm, slightly sweet bread that paired beautifully with nearly everything on the holiday table. The batter took minutes to prepare, stirred together with an egg and a splash of milk before sliding into the oven alongside whatever else was already cooking. Kids fought over the corner pieces where the crust turned crispy and the edges browned just enough to crackle between their teeth. Parents served it with chili, with beans, with ham, and with anything else that needed something warm and filling to complete the plate properly. The box promised simplicity, and it delivered without fail every single time the family needed it. Real cornbread from scratch took more ingredients, more time, and more skill than busy holiday kitchens could always afford to spare. Jiffy bridged the gap without apology, offering a shortcut that tasted close enough to homemade that most people never questioned it. The little blue and white box became a holiday staple in homes where the budget demanded compromises, earning loyalty from families who came to depend on its quiet reliability. Off-Brillup's original recipe were the ultimate lunchbox upgrade, a sticky sheet of fruit-flavored fun that promised real fruit taste. In reality, it was closer to edible plastic coated in corn syrup. The first generation of fruit roll-ups, launched in the 1980s, came loaded with artificial dyes, synthetic flavors, and enough preservatives to outlast civilization. Kids loved peeling them off wax paper, stretching them into shapes, and pretending they were eating something healthy. Parents convinced themselves they were fruit. The truth? They were sugar sculptures, with a shelf life measured in decades. When health watchdogs started questioning the ingredients, the company quietly reformulated the recipe. Less dye, fewer chemicals, more fruit concentrate. The newer versions looked cleaner but never tasted quite as wild. The original, in all its neon, sticky glory, disappeared, banned by shifting health standards and evolving food laws. But if you remember licking red dye off your fingers in 1985, you were part of an era that mistook chemistry for cuisine. Number 3 colored the candies, cereals, and desserts of the 1980s in shades of bright cherry and festive pink that children adored without hesitation. It made maraschino cherries glow atop ice cream sundaes, turned fruit snacks into jewel-toned treats, and gave holiday cookies their signature festive look. Parents bought these products without a second thought, assuming anything sold on grocery shelves must be safe. But researchers discovered something troubling when laboratory studies connected the dye to thyroid tumors in animals, raising alarm about what it might do inside human bodies. The FDA banned red dye number 3 from cosmetics, yet the additive lingered in certain foods under older approvals that seemed impossible to untangle. Families who remembered eating handfuls of those bright red candies began questioning what else slipped past safety checks. The controversy sparked lasting debates about artificial colors in the food supply. Looking back, Those vivid reds and pinks carry a complicated legacy, a symbol of an era when color mattered more than caution and danger hid behind cheerful packaging. Raw milk-made sweaters from relatives was a Christmas morning tradition that united families in colorful, sometimes questionable knitwear. Aunts and grandmothers spent months creating sweaters featuring reindeer or snowflakes rendered in yarn combinations that defied fashion wisdom. Children opened these gifts with expressions carefully managed to hide disappointment, knowing that putting on the sweater was expected. The wool often itched, the fit rarely flattered, and the colors clashed with everything. But none of that mattered once the family photo was taken. Matching sweaters turned individuals into a unified team, visually declaring that these people belonged together. Parents wore theirs with exaggerated enthusiasm, modeling gratitude they hoped children would learn. Some families still have those photos displayed, frozen moments of forced smiles that somehow capture the warmth of the season. The tradition faded as store-bought ugly sweaters became ironic fashion statements. But anyone who wore a handmade sweater knitted specifically for them knows the difference between purchased humor and genuine love stitched into every row. Phthalate softened vinyl advent calendars hung on kitchen walls and bedroom doors throughout the 1980s, their flexible plastic windows hiding chocolates or tiny toys behind each numbered door. Children loved the daily ritual of opening a new window, counting down to Christmas with treats that made the wait feel manageable and exciting. Parents appreciated how the soft vinyl calendars could roll up for storage without cracking, returning year after year looking almost new. That flexibility came from phthalates, chemical softeners that kept the vinyl pliable, but also migrated slowly to the surface over time. Every touch transferred these compounds onto small fingers that went straight into mouths, especially after handling the chocolates hidden inside. The calendars hung in warm kitchens where heat accelerated the chemical release, filling rooms with fumes nobody detected or understood. When studies linked phthalates to hormone disruption and developmental problems in children, regulators restricted their use in products marketed to kids. The beloved countdown calendars that once built Christmas anticipation became examples of how everyday plastics carried invisible risks. Radium-painted in the 80s was an experiment that looked like the future, until the future banned it. It was Pepsi's first foray into color innovation, a glowing cobalt drink that turned heads on store shelves. The blue hue was mesmerizing, electric, and unapologetically artificial, giving the soda an almost science fiction vibe. But the secret behind that brilliant color was less exciting. Chemical dyes, later deemed unsafe for human consumption. The dyes used, like Blue Number 1 and a few experimental additives, were linked to toxicity concerns after being tested in animals. Some reports even hinted at allergic reactions in sensitive drinkers. For a while, Pepsi brushed it off, calling it color evolution. The FDA called it something else, a violation. Stores pulled it from shelves quietly, and Pepsi moved on to safer formulations. Still, for anyone who tasted it, Blue Pepsi was unforgettable. Syrupy, neon, and strangely metallic, like drinking an electric wire. It was the 1980s bottled, loud, bold, and completely unbothered by health warnings until it was too late. The idea would later resurface decades later in the 1990s with Pepsi Blue, but that version was a sanitized echo of the original. The first Blue Pepsi remains a bright, toxic symbol of a decade that never met a bad idea it couldn't package and sell. Yes, original formula, were snack evolution taken too far. Crunchy, puffed Doritos shaped like tiny shells of doom. Marketed as next-level snacking, they were fried in oil-heavy formulas that made them dangerously addictive, and later, questionable in the eyes of regulators. Each bite exploded with flavor dust and grease, leaving fingerprints that could identify you for days. Kids loved the sound they made, that loud, hollow crunch that echoed like fireworks. Parents hated the oil stains left on furniture, walls, and jeans. Health officials hated them even more when lab tests showed oil saturation levels bordering on hazardous. People loved the crunch, but their stomachs didn't always agree. Complaints about the oils used pushed the snack into the FDA's spotlight. For a while, 3D Doritos became the stuff of playground legend, the chip that bit back. By the early 2000s, they vanished, quietly replaced by safer and less greasy iterations. They returned years later, reformulated and rebranded, but the original remains a myth among snack enthusiasts, proof that sometimes the future of food is a little too oily to handle. Artificial butter flavoring popcorn filled movie theaters and home kitchens throughout the 1980s with that irresistible buttery aroma that made the snack feel indulgent and satisfying. The chemical responsible, diacetyl, created a flavor so convincing that microwave popcorn became a household staple, and the smell alone triggered cravings that sold millions of bags. Families gathered around televisions with steaming bowls, breathing in that rich butter scent without any suspicion that the aroma itself might be harmful. The convenience seemed perfect, a few minutes in the microwave delivering theater-quality popcorn right at home. But workers in popcorn factories began developing a devastating lung disease that doctors eventually traced to inhaling diacetyl vapors during production. The condition, nicknamed popcorn lung, caused irreversible damage that left workers struggling to breathe. When the connection became public, manufacturers reformulated their products and improved factory ventilation. Consumers who had innocently enjoyed that buttery smell suddenly realized the flavoring carried risks that extended far beyond the snack itself. Silver strands had a mind of their own. You draped them carefully, one strand at a time, like the box suggested, or you grabbed a fistful and threw it like confetti. Either way, tinsel ended up everywhere. On the carpet, on the couch, in your hair, wrapped around the cat. You would find it in random places for months. Behind the TV in February, stuck to a sock in March, one piece clinging to the back of a chair like it was hiding from the vacuum. Tinsel was not decoration. It was an infestation with a holiday theme. Some families used it sparingly. Others went full blizzard, layering it so thick you could barely see the ornaments underneath. Either way, it reflected every light in the room and made the tree shimmer like something from a movie. The cheap tinsel was paper-thin and tore if you looked at it wrong. The fancy stuff was heavier, shinier, and somehow ended up in your mouth at least once per season. Pets loved it, vacuums hated it, and no matter how careful you were during cleanup, at least one strand survived until Easter. Tinsel was chaos. Beautiful, sparkly, impossible to contain chaos. And you loved every strand of it. Cadmium red painted wooden ornaments hung from Christmas trees across the country in the 1980s, their bright crimson finish adding that perfect pop of traditional holiday color. Families loved how the rich red shades stood out against green branches, catching light in ways that made even simple wooden shapes look festive. Craft stores sold them by the dozen, and parents often let children help paint additional ornaments at home using similar commercial paints without checking labels. The vivid red pigment that made these ornaments so appealing came from cadmium, a toxic heavy metal that created colors more brilliant than safer alternatives could achieve. Every time someone handled the ornaments, adjusted their placement, or brushed against them while reaching for presents, tiny particles of cadmium paint transferred onto skin. Children who put ornaments in their mouths or touched them and then ate cookies absorbed the metal directly. When researchers documented cadmium's dangers, including kidney damage and bone weakening, regulators banned its use in consumer products. The cheerful red that once symbolized Christmas spirit became a cautionary tale about hidden ingredients. Ham with the key opener was the centerpiece of countless holiday tables in the 1980s, glistening under kitchen lights as if it had earned its place at the head of the spread. The metal key attached to the side was almost ceremonial, twisted slowly until the lid curled away and revealed the pink dome of pressed meat inside. It smelled faintly of salt and something vaguely smoky, and it sliced cleanly into rounds that looked almost elegant when fanned across a platter. Families who could not afford a fresh roast or a honey-glazed spiral found dignity in this tin-encased alternative, dressing it up with pineapple rings, maraschino cherries, and a sticky brown sugar glaze. Children watched the slicing with fascination, unaware that the ham represented careful budgeting and weeks of saving. It fed a crowd without emptying a wallet, and leftovers lasted well into the new year. The canned ham never tried to be something it was not, and families embraced it without shame. It was protein, it was tradition, and it was enough. And when the last slice was gone, the empty tin often found a second life holding buttons, screws, or childhood treasures. Bagged dye. Number 2 was the invisible villain lurking in nearly every 1980s candy aisle. It made cherries brighter, strawberries redder, and fruit punch practically glow in the dark. Kids loved it. Parents did not. In the mid-1980s, scientists began raising red flags, linking the dye to hyperactivity and even potential health risks. Suddenly, that bright candy color looked a little too radioactive for comfort. Companies scrambled to pull products, and supermarkets quietly replaced the neon reds with paler shades of safety. It was one of the first times America realized how much chemistry hid behind natural flavor. Red dye number 2 became a symbol of corporate denial and consumer awakening. By the time it was banned in food production, entire aisles had to be reformulated. Candies, cereals, drinks, all of them changed overnight. What once looked delicious suddenly looked dangerous. Still, for anyone who grew up in the 1980s, that bright, unnatural red remains unforgettable, a warning wrapped in nostalgia. Sodium cyclamate. Sweetened drinks were everywhere in the 1980s, filling refrigerators and vending machines with diet sodas that promised guilt-free refreshment. The artificial sweetener tasted remarkably close to sugar, lacked the bitter aftertaste of alternatives, and helped calorie-conscious consumers enjoy drinks without weight gain associated with regular soda. Families stocked cases of these beverages, and dieters relied on them as essential tools in weight management. The sweeteners seemed like a perfect solution to growing concerns about sugar and obesity. But cyclamate had already been banned in the United States back in 1969 after studies linked it to bladder cancer in laboratory animals. Despite ongoing debates about those findings, the ban remained firmly in place. Many consumers had no idea they were consuming something prohibited when they purchased imported products or traveled abroad. The controversy highlighted how differently nations approached food safety. Today, cyclamate remains forbidden in the United States, a quiet reminder that what tastes sweet can sometimes carry bitter consequences. Christmas Eve had a dark side. While kids slept dreaming of morning, parents were downstairs with a pile of parts, a single sheet of instructions, and a flashlight clenched between their teeth. Assembly required, sanity not included. Every toy in the 1980s came in pieces. Bikes, dollhouses, race car tracks, kitchen sets. The instructions were always vague, sometimes in 3 languages, and occasionally just a drawing that looked like it was made by someone who had never seen the toy. You needed a Phillips head screwdriver, a flathead, an Allen wrench, and possibly a degree in engineering. Tabs did not fit into slots. Screws were missing. And someone always whispered, "I think we put that part on backwards." Dads muttered things under their breath. Moms held the flashlight and tried not to laugh. Hours passed. Coffee was brewed. Somewhere around 2 a.m., the thing was finally built. Slightly crooked, definitely unstable, but upright. And in the morning, you ran downstairs and played with it for 10 minutes before moving on to the next gift. You never knew. You never saw the sweat, the frustration, the moment your dad considered just returning the whole thing. All you saw was magic. And that was the point. 3 words. Oranges. Asbestos snow blankets for tree skirts were considered the height of holiday elegance in the 1980s, spreading across floors beneath decorated trees like freshly fallen powder. These fluffy white sheets looked impossibly realistic, creating that perfect winter scene families saw in department store windows. Parents carefully arranged them each December, tucking the edges around tree stands and piling wrapped gifts on top as if presents had landed in fresh snow. Nobody suspected that the fibers making the blankets so soft and flame-resistant were the same ones doctors would later connect to devastating lung diseases. Children crawled across them reaching for presents, pets napped on their surfaces, and vacuum cleaners stirred up invisible clouds every time someone tidied the living room. The asbestos fibers did not announce themselves with smell or texture. They simply drifted into the air and settled into lungs where they remained for decades. When health authorities recognized the danger, blankets were pulled from shelves and homes were urged to dispose of them carefully. What once symbolized cozy holiday perfection became a chilling reminder that comfort can carry invisible costs. Hamburger Helper stretched ground beef into full family meals during the holiday season, when budgets tightened and creativity became essential for getting through the month. The boxes lined pantry shelves in flavors like stroganoff, cheeseburger macaroni, and beef taco, each one promising a complete dinner with just 1 pound of meat and a few cups of water. Kids loved the salty, cheesy taste that made even the cheapest ground beef feel like a feast, and parents loved how quickly the meal came together after long days of holiday shopping or wrapping presents late into the night. The noodles cooked right in the skillet alongside the meat, absorbing flavor and filling bellies without requiring separate pots or complicated timing. Leftovers reheated well the next day, stretching a single box into 2 meals when necessary. There was no pretending it was gourmet, but there was no shame in it either. Hamburger Helper fed families when fresh ingredients were out of reach, and it did so with a consistency that became comforting over time. Those boxes represented survival dressed up as convenience, and they earned their place in holiday memories across the country. Sharkleberry Fin Kool-Aid was neon pink madness in a pitcher. The flavor was supposed to be a mix of strawberry, banana, and orange, but it mostly tasted like sugar, water, and chaos. Its mascot, a surfing shark, became an icon of summertime fun, until the drink's dyes came under fire. The drink's color was so bright it could stain anything: countertops, clothes, even your tongue for a full day. Parents joked it could be used as a highlighter, but when new dye regulations came out, that joke stopped being funny. Health officials found the artificial coloring used didn't meet new safety standards, and suddenly, the shark had to swim away. Parents who once laughed at the color started reading labels for the first time. The FDA crackdown on certain dyes sealed its fate. Kool-Aid tried to replace it with other tropical flavors, but none had the same wild personality. For kids who grew up in the 1980s, Sharkleberry Fin wasn't just a drink. It was a sugar-fueled fantasy that glowed brighter than the sun and disappeared just as fast. Nitrite-cured meats without safety limits filled deli counters and refrigerators throughout the 1980s, from sliced ham and bacon to hot dogs and bologna that children devoured without question. The preservatives kept meat looking pink and appetizing while preventing bacterial growth that could cause food poisoning. Families packed sandwiches for school lunches, served platters at gatherings, and fried bacon every weekend morning, believing they were enjoying simple, satisfying food. The smell alone made mouths water and kitchens feel like home. But nitrites react with proteins during cooking and digestion to form nitrosamines, compounds that researchers link to stomach cancer and other diseases. Studies showed that heavy consumption of processed meats carried real health consequences, especially for children whose smaller bodies absorbed higher relative doses. Regulators eventually imposed strict limits on nitrite levels and required manufacturers to add compounds that inhibit nitrosamine formation. The beloved deli meats of the past now carry warning labels. It is unsettling to realize that sandwiches packed with love once carried risks nobody thought to mention. Aflatoxin, leaving real food out for Santa overnight, seems like the most innocent Christmas ritual of all, and in private homes it still is. But in the 1970s, this tradition extended far beyond living rooms. Schools, community centers, stores, and even public lobbies would set out plates of cookies, pieces of fruit, slices of cake, or whole cups of warm milk for Santa, letting every child who walked by feel like they were part of the magic. Nobody questioned hygiene. Nobody wondered how long the food had been sitting out or whether it was safe. It was simply a gesture of charm and belief, one that made the holiday season feel alive in every corner of town. Today, however, public health codes strictly forbid leaving perishable foods out in public spaces. Food safety laws treat these little displays as contamination risks. Even cookies, if unsealed, can violate regulations about pests and sanitation. The world became more careful, cleaner, and much more anxious. Maybe that is understandable, but something tender was lost along the way. When you think back on those public Santa plates, overflowing with half-eaten treats and crumbs left by passing children, you can almost feel the warmth of a community that believed in magic together. Lead-painted ceramic Christmas villages were treasured centerpieces in countless 1980s homes, their detailed houses and shops glowing warmly beneath strings of miniature lights. Families collected pieces year after year, building elaborate winter scenes on mantels and display tables that became the heart of holiday decorating. Children loved examining the tiny windows, doors, and figurines, often picking up pieces to look at the intricate details painted with bright, glossy colors. Those vibrant reds, greens, and yellows came from glazes that contained lead, a detail no manufacturer felt compelled to disclose. Every time someone dusted the village, rearranged buildings, or touched the smooth ceramic surfaces, microscopic lead particles transferred onto fingers that later touched faces and food. Parents encouraged children to help set up the display, never suspecting the family tradition was quietly exposing everyone to a dangerous heavy metal. When testing revealed how much lead these decorations contained, regulators demanded changes that ended production of the original formulas. Those cherished villages now carry warnings that transform nostalgia into unease. Cheese in the orange box was one of the most recognizable symbols of stretching through hard times, a dense golden block that arrived through commodity programs and sat heavily in the hands of whoever carried it home. The cheese itself was rich, creamy, and melted into everything with an almost aggressive smoothness that store-bought cheese could never match. Families sliced it for sandwiches, cubed it for snacking, and grated it over casseroles that stretched ground beef into meals for six. There was no pretending about where it came from, and kids often saw the orange box sitting on the counter before it was quickly tucked away. Some families felt embarrassed picking it up, standing in lines at distribution centers while hoping no neighbors drove by. But once the cheese hit the pan, sizzling into grilled sandwiches or bubbling over macaroni, the shame dissolved into something closer to gratitude. It tasted better than it had any right to, and many adults still chase that particular flavor without realizing where the memory began. Government cheese fed families when paychecks fell short, and it did so without apology. Orbit's drink looked like a science experiment, and honestly, it kind of was. The glass bottles were filled with colorful liquid and tiny gelatin beads that floated mid-air like some kind of edible lava lamp. It was marketed as a drink from the future, combining 1990s aesthetics with 1980s optimism. The problem was, no one knew what it actually was, or if it was safe. The suspended beads were made from gellan gum, an unapproved additive at the time. Regulators later found the formula didn't meet food safety standards, citing issues with consistency, stability, and digestion. Consumers were equally confused, half fascinated, half disgusted. The drink's texture was bizarre, thick yet watery, with chewy bits that made every sip a dare. People bought it once for the novelty, took a sip, and left the rest on the shelf. Within a year, the futuristic beverage was banned from most markets and quietly discontinued. Today, surviving bottles sell for hundreds of dollars online, still sealed, not because anyone wants to drink them, but because they look like relics from an alternate reality where taste didn't matter. Orbits was what happens when marketing dreams too big and science says, absolutely not. Glazed ceramic food containers arrived in American kitchens throughout the 1980s, imported from countries where manufacturing standards differed dramatically from domestic regulations. These colorful bowls, plates, and storage containers caught eyes with their vibrant designs and affordable prices, filling cupboards with pieces that seemed both decorative and practical. Families stored leftovers, served meals, and displayed fruit in containers they never suspected could be dangerous. The glazes looked beautiful, the ceramics felt sturdy, and nothing about their appearance suggested any hidden threat. But lead in ceramic glazes leaches into food, especially when contents are acidic, hot, or stored for extended periods. Families unknowingly poison themselves with every serving of tomato sauce, citrus juice, or pickled vegetables placed in these containers. When testing revealed dangerous lead levels in imported ceramics, regulators banned the most hazardous products and established stricter standards for anything touching food. The colorful dishes that once brightened kitchen shelves now serve as reminders that beauty can sometimes mask serious danger hiding just beneath the surface. Saffroll-flavored scrap lumber and cardboard in the fireplace was how many families kept warm during the holidays when proper firewood was beyond reach. Broken pallets from behind the grocery store, construction scraps gathered from building sites, and cardboard boxes flattened and stacked became the fuel that made Christmas Eve feel cozy. Children helped collect materials throughout December, understanding that warmth was something you worked for, rather than something that simply appeared. The fire crackled differently with each type of scrap, sometimes popping with leftover nails, sometimes flaring bright from wax coatings on cardboard. Families sat close together, not just for togetherness, but because the heat faded quickly past the first few feet. Some houses had no fireplace at all and relied on space heaters surrounded by the same cardboard that might have burned in luckier homes. The smell of burning paper and old wood became the smell of Christmas for children who knew no other way. Those improvised fires taught that warmth is precious, that resourcefulness matters, and that gathering together around whatever light you have is what makes the coldest nights survivable. Bowls and cheese balls were the twin stars of every grown-up Christmas party. In kitchens across America, tables gleamed under the light of cut glass bowls filled with ruby red punch floating with slices of orange. Nearby, cheese balls rolled in nuts, or parsley sat proudly beside stacks of Ritz crackers. The smell was rich, savory, and sweet all at once, and every adult had their own secret recipe. Laughter grew louder with each refill, stories grew taller, and someone always spilled just a little on the tablecloth. Kids peeked in from the hallway, stealing crackers before running off again. These gatherings were more than parties. They were annual reunions, proof that friendship could be as warm as the punch itself. Even now, the sight of that silver ladle or the taste of cheddar mixed with cream cheese can bring the past rushing back. It wasn't about sophistication, it was about celebration, plain and true. The clink of glasses, the glow of the tree, the hum of old records. Together they made the room feel like Christmas itself. Spam was the uninvited guest that always found a way to stay for dinner, and at Christmas, it wore its Sunday best. Families fried it, baked it, diced it, or dressed it with cloves and brown sugar like it was a proper roast. You could slice it into sandwiches or stretch it into casseroles, and no one complained because it filled you up. Its pink, rubbery charm became an odd symbol of comfort and survival. It sizzled loud in the pan, the smell of salt and fat turning hunger into hope. Housewives sliced it in neat squares, brushed it with glaze, and served it proudly, because feeding your family was what mattered most. The texture might have been strange, but the pride in serving it was real. Spam wasn't just food. It was a symbol of resourcefulness and love in hard times. For those living paycheck to paycheck, Spam was not an embarrassment. It was reliability in a tin. Every kitchen cupboard had at least one can tucked away just in case. It was salty, hearty, and familiar, the kind of taste that did not pretend to be anything else. In a way, it reminded people that Christmas was not about extravagance. It was about making something humble feel like home. The artificial whipped cream in pressurized glass cans was a disaster waiting to happen. And in the 1980s, it finally did. Long before aluminum cans became standard, some whipped cream brands packaged their product in sleek, clear glass bottles to show off the rich texture inside. They looked beautiful in commercials, frosty, elegant, and perfectly premium. But behind that gloss was a bomb. The pressurized nitrous oxide used to propel the cream reacted unpredictably with the glass, especially when stored in cold grocery freezers. Several cans shattered or outright exploded, sending shards and whipped cream flying. Supermarkets reported injuries, lawsuits followed, and regulators stepped in immediately. The product was recalled nationwide within months, replaced by safer aluminum designs. Some brands tried to blame improper storage, but consumers weren't buying it, literally or figuratively. The incident reshaped how aerosol products were tested and handled in the food industry. For a while, though, it was pure chaos. aisles covered in cream, warning signs posted in freezer sections, and one more lesson learned about how form should never beat function. The glass cans disappeared forever, but their story lives on as one of the strangest explosions in grocery history. Milk sold openly in grocery stores felt like a wholesome throwback during the 1980s, something that connected modern families to simpler dairy traditions their grandparents knew. Cartons sat beside pasteurized options, marketed as more natural, more nutritious, and closer to the way milk was meant to be consumed. Health enthusiasts praised its enzymes and unprocessed purity, believing heat treatment destroyed things that made milk beneficial. Families poured it over cereal, gave it to children, and used it in recipes without imagining any threat lurking inside. But raw milk carried bacteria that pasteurization was designed to destroy, including Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, organisms capable of causing severe illness or death. Outbreaks linked to unpasteurized dairy mounted as families fell sick, some suffering permanent damage while others did not survive. State after state began banning retail sales, and federal regulators prohibited raw milk from crossing state lines. The drink that symbolized natural living became a public health battleground. Today, it remains illegal in most places, a reminder that tradition and safety do not always walk together. Sleds without any safety features were the classic Christmas gift that families trusted for generations. And in the 1980s, they still flew down snowy hills with children aboard who had nothing but hope and gravity keeping them safe. These sleds were built from steel runners and wooden slats, heavy enough to build serious speed and sturdy enough to survive collisions that lighter plastic models could never withstand. Kids loved the thrill of racing downhill, steering with their feet, or simply holding on and praying the ride ended somewhere soft. What nobody talked about was how those steel runners sliced through snow and occasionally through skin when crashes sent riders tumbling. The wooden slats splintered on impact, and the metal edges grew sharp with rust and wear over seasons of use. Children collided with trees, fences, and each other at speeds that turned minor accidents into broken bones and concussions. Parents watched from the top of hills, assuming that the snow itself would cushion any fall, never realizing how hard frozen ground becomes beneath a thin white layer. The sleds that generations had trusted became symbols of an era that measured fun differently than safety. Pogo stick formaldehyde-treated artificial garlands were draped across mantels, staircases, and doorways in nearly every 1980s home, their lush green appearance lasting season after season without wilting. Families loved how realistic they looked compared to older plastic versions, and the convenience of never replacing them made the investment worthwhile. Parents wrapped them around banisters while children helped secure them with ribbons, everyone breathing in that faint chemical smell nobody questioned. The garlands held their shape because manufacturers treated them with formaldehyde, a preservative that slowly released invisible fumes throughout the holiday season. Every time someone walked past or adjusted a draped section, more chemical escaped into living spaces where families gathered. Children sleeping near decorated doorways breathed the vapors all night without anyone realizing the exposure was happening. When researchers connected formaldehyde off-gassing to respiratory irritation and long-term concerns, regulations forced manufacturers to find safer methods. The garlands that once seemed like smart investments became reminders of how convenience can mask invisible dangers. Hang powder for Christmas morning drinks turned tap water into something that felt almost festive, even if it never quite matched the brightness of real orange juice. The jar sat on the counter with its bold orange lid, scooped out carefully so the powder did not cloud the air and land on everything nearby. Kids stirred their glasses with enthusiasm, watching the crystals dissolve into something that tasted like citrus mixed with sugar and nostalgia. Fresh juice was expensive, especially around the holidays when everyone wanted it, and Tang offered a compromise that stretched further and lasted longer. Astronauts drank it in space, or at least that is what the commercials claimed, and that fact alone gave it a certain credibility that orange juice could never match. Parents served it in plastic cups during holiday breakfasts, and no one complained because the sweetness made everything feel brighter. The tang on the tongue, the faint chemical aftertaste that some people secretly loved, became part of the season itself. Kids did not realize they were drinking a budget substitute. To them, it was simply what Christmas morning tasted like, and that memory lingered long after the jar was empty. Canned veganism was mandatory in the 1970s classroom. Every morning began with the Pledge of Allegiance, and refusing to stand was seen as an act of defiance. Students who stayed seated or silent could face detention, suspension, or even expulsion. It was less about love of country and more about enforcing obedience. Some kids quietly mouthed the words to avoid punishment, while others looked down at their desks, hearts pounding in defiance they could not voice. A few brave ones refused entirely, sparking whispers, outrage, or even calls to their parents. Those moments turned a daily routine into a test of loyalty no child should have had to face. Teachers were expected to report disrespectful students, and principals treated it like insubordination. Few questioned whether forcing loyalty was loyalty at all. Many children recited the words automatically, their voices blending into a rhythm they never truly thought about. Decades later, the idea of punishing someone for silent protest feels completely un-American, yet that was the daily reality. The 1970s may have looked free and expressive on the surface, but inside the classroom, conformity was law. The He-Man homemade gifts from relatives were a holiday gamble. Sometimes you got a beautiful hand-knit sweater. Other times you got a crocheted toilet paper cover shaped like a poodle. You smiled either way, because that was the rule. Aunts and grandmas were crafty, very crafty. You unwrapped the gift slowly, unsure what was inside. A macrame owl? A needlepoint pillow with your name misspelled? A latch hook rug in colors that matched absolutely nothing in your house? You held it up, nodded, and said, "I love it," while making eye contact with your sibling across the room. They were barely holding it together. These gifts were made with love, real love, hours of work, yards of yarn, and a pattern from a 1974 craft magazine. They were not cool, they were not useful, but they were given with pride. You displayed them, at least until the relative left. Then they went into a closet, a drawer, or a box labeled "Grandma's stuff." But years later, you found them again, and suddenly they meant everything. Because Grandma was gone. And that weird owl? That was her hands, her time, her way of saying, "I thought of you." You kept it. You always kept it, even if it was shaped like a mushroom. Cellulose-coated paper chains hung in loops across 1980s living rooms, their shiny surfaces catching light and adding festive color to every corner. Children spent hours at kitchen tables cutting strips, gluing links together, and coating them with lacquer sprays that made the paper gleam like something from a department store display. The craft was a beloved holiday tradition, teaching patience and creativity while producing decorations the whole family could admire. What nobody realized was that nitrocellulose, the compound making that glossy finish possible, was essentially the same material used in early film stock notorious for fires. The coated chains hung near fireplaces, candles, and hot light bulbs, inches away from ignition sources that could transform innocent decorations into fast-spreading flames. Families strung them across rooms without understanding how quickly fire could race along those shiny links. When fire safety experts documented the risks of nitrocellulose in home crafts, the sprays were reformulated or discontinued. The cheerful paper chains that represented family togetherness became cautionary examples of flammable beauty. In the 1980s was an experiment that looked like the future, until the future banned it. It was Pepsi's first foray into color innovation, a glowing cobalt drink that turned heads on store shelves. The blue hue was mesmerizing, electric, and unapologetically artificial, giving the soda an almost science fiction vibe. But the secret behind that brilliant color was less exciting. Chemical dyes, later deemed unsafe for human consumption. The dyes used, like Blue Number 1 and a few experimental additives, were linked to toxicity concerns after being tested in animals. Some reports even hinted at allergic reactions in sensitive drinkers. For a while, Pepsi brushed it off, calling it color evolution. The FDA called it something else, a violation. Stores pulled it from shelves quietly, and Pepsi moved on to safer formulations. Still, for anyone who tasted it, Blue Pepsi was unforgettable. Syrupy, neon, and strangely metallic, like drinking an electric wire. It was the 1980s bottled, loud, bold, and completely unbothered by health warnings until it was too late. The idea would later resurface decades later in the 1990s with Pepsi Blue, but that version was a sanitized echo of the original. The first Blue Pepsi remains a bright, toxic symbol of a decade that never met a bad idea it couldn't package and sell. Sulfite-preserved restaurant salad bars were the crown jewels of casual dining in the 1980s. Those long, gleaming counters overflowing with crisp lettuce, vegetables, and toppings that seemed impossibly fresh. Families lined up with plates in hand, thrilled by endless variety and the illusion of healthy eating. What diners did not realize was that many restaurants sprayed produce with sulfite solutions to keep everything looking vibrant long past its natural shelf life. The chemicals stopped browning and allowed vegetables to sit under heat lamps for hours without wilting. It seemed like a miracle of food science. But sulfites triggered severe reactions in certain people, especially those with asthma, causing breathing difficulties and, in tragic cases, death. Reports of allergic emergencies mounted until regulators could no longer ignore the pattern. The FDA banned sulfite sprays on fresh fruits and vegetables served raw, forcing restaurants to rethink salad bar practices entirely. That gleaming buffet of the past carries a shadow most people never knew existed, a reminder that freshness can sometimes be a dangerous illusion. Red dye number. Using asbestos-based fake snow for decor sounds unthinkable today. But in the 1970s, it was still floating around in attics, storage boxes, and leftover holiday supplies from even earlier decades. Families sprinkled it across mantels, nativity scenes, and Christmas village displays without a hint of hesitation because it looked stunningly real. It clung beautifully, stayed in place, and made every surface look winter-kissed, even if the weather outside refused to cooperate. Most people never imagined that the soft white powder carried risks far beyond messiness. The word asbestos simply did not trigger panic yet, at least not in the way it does today. Back then, you were more focused on making your holiday decor look as magical as possible, especially if you were working on a budget and wanted your home to feel special. Today, possession or use of anything containing asbestos can bring legal trouble, health warnings, and removal orders. It is one of those dramatic shifts where science taught us something we wish we had known earlier. But when people look back at old photos, they do not remember the danger. They remember the tiny hillside of white powder beneath the ceramic houses, the shimmer on the mantel, and how perfectly it tied the whole scene together. Lights without thermal cutoffs sat proudly in windows throughout the 1980s, their warm glow signaling holiday cheer to every neighbor passing by. Families placed them on sills, plugged them in, and left them burning for hours, sometimes days, without considering the heat building inside plastic bases. The soft, flickering light looked peaceful and traditional, so nobody imagined these simple decorations could pose any real threat. But early electric candles lacked the automatic shutoff features that modern versions include as standard safety measures. The bulbs inside grew dangerously hot over time, and plastic housings were never designed to withstand sustained heat exposure. Curtains brushed against warm bases, wooden sills absorbed rising temperatures, and transformers worked overtime without any mechanism to interrupt the current. Fires started in homes where families assumed the candles were safe, often while everyone slept believing the glow was harmless. When fire investigators traced blazes back to these unregulated candles, mandatory safety standards finally arrived. The cozy window tradition came with risks families only understood after tragedy struck. Meat and Vienna sausages in tiny tins found their way into stockings and snack drawers as affordable holiday treats that looked almost whimsical in their compact packaging. The potted meat spread onto crackers like a pâté for people who had never heard the word, salty and dense with a texture that some loved and others tolerated. Vienna sausages slid out of their cans in neat little rows, pale pink and glistening, ready to be eaten straight or tucked into recipes that made do with what was available. Kids saw them as novelty foods, something fun and different from the usual meals, and that perception made the budget stretch easier. Parents appreciated how long the tiny tins lasted in the pantry, never spoiling, always ready when hunger struck without warning. They showed up at picnics, road trips, and late-night snacking sessions, never demanding refrigeration or special treatment. And during the holidays, they became stocking stuffers that actually got eaten instead of tossed aside. The tins were cheap, the contents were filling, and the memories they created lasted far longer than anyone expected. Store parquet. Margarine looked like the future of cooking, smooth, golden, and ready to squirt straight from a bottle. You didn't need a knife, a dish, or even manners. Just aim and squeeze. For busy 1980s households, it was heaven in a bottle. But the dream melted fast. The plastic packaging was made with chemicals that didn't play well with heat, and kitchens tend to get hot. Over time, the bottles began leaching toxins into the margarine, especially when left near stoves or windows. Families started noticing a strange film forming on their food, slick, waxy, and nothing like butter. Laboratory tests later confirmed what everyone feared. The bottles were slowly contaminating their contents. It was the kind of convenience no one wanted anymore. The FDA wasn't impressed. Consumers noticed strange aftertastes, discoloration, and even separation inside the bottle. Parquet scrambled to defend the product, insisting it was safe when used correctly, but the damage was done. By the late 1980s, new safety rules forced the company to retire the original design. It was a reminder that even convenience has limits, especially when your easy squeeze turns into a chemical squeeze. Ethylene dibromide fumigated flour sat in pantries and bakery stockrooms across the country during the 1980s, quietly contaminating bread, cakes, cookies, and pastries that families trusted as perfectly safe. The chemical was used to fumigate stored grain, killing insects and preventing infestations that could ruin entire harvests. Farmers and processors saw it as essential protection, a modern solution to ancient problems of spoilage and pest damage. Nobody thought twice about what happened when fumigated grains were milled into flour and shipped to grocery stores. But ethylene dibromide did not simply vanish during processing. Residues remained in finished products, and researchers discovered the chemical was a confirmed carcinogen capable of causing serious harm with repeated exposure. When the EPA banned the fumigant, the announcement sent ripples through the entire grain industry. Bakers, millers, and consumers questioned everything on their shelves. It was a jarring reminder that contamination can travel invisibly from field to fork, and that even bread, the most basic food, could carry dangers nobody saw coming. Nativity scenes with hand-painted ceramic figures was a December ritual that transformed coffee tables, mantels, and windowsills into sacred little worlds. Families unwrapped each piece carefully, setting Mary and Joseph in place first, then adding shepherds, wise men, and animals one by one as the days counted down to Christmas. The figures were often chipped from years of handling, their paint faded in spots that only made them feel more beloved. Some sets had been passed down through generations, arriving in boxes lined with tissue paper that smelled like old storage and quiet reverence. Children loved arranging the animals, debating where the donkey should stand or whether the sheep looked better near the manger. The baby Jesus figure was always saved for last, placed in the tiny cradle only on Christmas Eve as a way of marking the moment the celebration truly began. These scenes were not just decorations. They were stories told in miniature, lessons about patience and the meaning behind the holiday rush. The ritual of setting them up year after year created memories no store-bought perfection could ever match, grounding Christmas in something older than tinsel or wrapping paper. Bubble lights on Christmas trees were little tubes of magic, glowing like tiny lava lamps across the branches. Each bulb, filled with colored liquid, would come alive as the heat rose and bubbles began to dance inside. Kids would stare for minutes, mesmerized by their rhythm and sparkle. They weren't just decorations, they were living, glowing proof that the tree was awake. Every family had their favorite color, blue, red, or gold, and everyone knew not to touch them while they bubbled. They hummed softly in the darkened room, a hypnotic mix of science and Christmas wonder. Parents loved them for their retro charm, and children swore they were enchanted. Even though the cords tangled and a bulb would always refuse to work, no one cared. The glow they gave off felt warm and alive, different from any ordinary light. When the tree lights went out at night, the last few bubbles would rise, fade, and rest, like Christmas itself taking a breath before morning. They were fragile, fleeting, and unforgettable. Long before LED strings or flashing displays, bubble lights were a simple kind of magic that needed no batteries, only wonder. Using frozen juice concentrate in the small cardboard cans sat in freezers waiting to be mixed into pitchers of something that almost tasted like fresh squeezed. The frozen cylinder slid out with a satisfying thunk, landing in the pitcher before tap water dissolved it into something sweet and bright. Kids stirred enthusiastically, watching the orange or grape or lemonade color spread through the water like magic happening in their own kitchen. Fresh juice was expensive and spoiled quickly, but concentrate lasted for months in the freezer and stretched into multiple servings that cost a fraction of the real thing. Parents served it at breakfast, packed it in thermoses for school lunches, and poured it at holiday gatherings where nobody questioned what they were drinking. The taste was sweeter than fresh, more consistent, and perfectly acceptable to kids who had never known the difference anyway. Those little cans became a staple of morning routines in homes where every dollar mattered. The juice did its job without pretense, filling glasses and filling the gap between what families wanted and what they could actually afford. Kinder. Surprise eggs were the perfect balance of joy and danger. A hollow chocolate egg wrapped in foil, it hid a tiny plastic capsule inside. And inside that, a surprise toy. It was pure childhood wonder in edible form. The problem? American law does not allow non-edible items hidden inside food, especially small ones that can choke a child. Customs agents began confiscating Kinder eggs by the thousands, calling them contraband candy. Kids in Europe enjoyed them freely, while American children could only dream or smuggle them from relatives abroad. Parents protested, collectors cried foul, but safety laws won. In the US, Kinder eggs were banned entirely, replaced years later by a safer, separated version, Kinder Joy. Still, for those who remember the original, nothing compares to the thrill of cracking open an egg and finding both chocolate and a toy, a forbidden combination too perfect for its own good. Fruit roll diethylstilbestrol chicken reached dinner tables across the country during the 1980s, the synthetic hormone implanted in poultry to accelerate growth and increase profits for producers. Farmers embraced the technology because it meant birds reached market weight faster, reducing feed costs and speeding up production cycles. Consumers benefited from lower prices without questioning what made chicken so affordable and abundant. Families roasted whole birds for Sunday dinners, fried drumsticks for weeknight meals, and served chicken at nearly every gathering. The meat seemed wholesome and natural, a lean protein that health-conscious eaters preferred over red meat. But DES had already been connected to devastating health effects in humans, causing cancer and reproductive problems in children whose mothers took the hormone during pregnancy. When researchers found residues in poultry, the implications were deeply troubling. Regulators banned hormone implants in chicken production, though the damage to public trust was significant. The affordable chicken that families had eaten for years suddenly seemed far less innocent than anyone had imagined. Heptachlorobenzol was supposed to go on the tree. It did not stay there. Those thin, using popcorn and cranberry strings as tree garland was one of those traditions that turned a simple evening into a family production line filled with laughter and sticky fingers. Someone popped the corn in a heavy pot, while others threaded needles with whatever string the house could spare, and then the real work began. Children learned quickly that freshly popped kernels crumbled under pressure, so patience was the only way forward. The rhythm of pushing a needle through soft white puffs and deep red berries became almost hypnotic, a meditation disguised as decoration. Fingers turned sticky from cranberry juice and slightly greasy from popcorn oil, but nobody minded because the garland grew longer with every passing minute. By the time the strings wrapped around the tree, they looked rustic, warm, and completely unique. After Christmas, the strings were hung outside as gifts for winter wildlife, and birds would feast on the leftovers for days. Those popcorn and cranberry chains connected families to generations before them, when every decoration came from the kitchen and every ornament carried the fingerprints of someone who made it with care. Selling homemade holiday baked goods without permits was a simple way to share joy and earn a little cash in the 1970s. Families made fudge, fruitcake, cookies, and sweetbreads in their home kitchens, wrapping them in foil or wax paper and selling them to neighbors, teachers, or church members. No one asked for licenses or health inspections. People trusted the hands that baked the food, not the paperwork behind it. There was pride in every recipe, many passed down through generations and guarded like treasure. And buyers felt like they were supporting friends, not just buying dessert. People trusted each other. The taste of a neighbor's homemade treat felt like a connection, not a risk. Today, though, food handling laws make this illegal without proper certification. Kitchens must be inspected, ingredients documented, and packaging regulated. Something warm and human was lost in that shift, but the memory of receiving those imperfect, lovingly made treats still brings comfort every holiday season. It started with sweet potato casserole, were a holiday indulgence that felt extravagant, even if they came from the cheapest bag in the store. Housewives scattered them over canned yams, popped the dish into the oven, and waited for the sugar to melt into golden clouds. It was dessert disguised as a side dish, a sneaky little treat that made even the simplest dinner feel special. The scent of toasted marshmallows mixed with cinnamon filled the air and made Christmas dinner feel like magic. Watching the marshmallows puff and brown under the heat was a kind of ritual, simple, slow, and full of anticipation. Children hovered by the oven door, waiting for that perfect, gooey crust to appear. It was sweet chaos on a spoon, the kind of dish that made you forget rationing, bills, and worry for a moment. Every bite was sugar and warmth, a promise that love still lived in that kitchen. Children loved it. Adults pretended not to, and everyone took seconds anyway. It was the kind of sugary comfort that turned hardship into joy, even if just for a few bites. Every spoonful was sticky, sweet, and full of warmth, the flavor of thrift wrapped in celebration. Blue Pepsi in the 19 tartar control potato chips sounded like a joke, and honestly, it probably should have stayed one. In an era obsessed with innovation, some marketing genius decided that vinegar-flavored chips should taste more cleansing. So they launched tartar control chips, seasoned with acidic compounds meant to mimic the tang of tartar sauce. They hit the shelves in select stores in the mid-1980s and were gone almost immediately. Customers hated them. The flavor was a sour, greasy mess that coated your mouth in salt and regret. Health experts didn't love them either, since the acidic oils were harsh on enamel and stomach lining. Even the name was off-putting. No one wants dental hygiene in their snack aisle. By the time complaints reached the FDA, the brand had already started pulling inventory. Some blamed a bad batch, others blamed bad judgment. But either way, the clean chip experiment ended in disgrace. Years later, collectors still talk about the packaging, a smiling tooth holding a bag of chips, blissfully unaware of its fate. Tartar control chips became the ultimate punchline in the 1980s snack lore, proof that not every new idea deserves to make it past the brainstorming stage. Bromate bread rose high and golden in bakeries and home ovens throughout the 1980s, its perfect texture owing much to a chemical additive that made dough stronger and more elastic. Bakers loved how bromate improved rise, created finer crumb structure, and produced loaves that looked professionally crafted even from amateur kitchens. The additive became standard in commercial bread production, appearing in everything from sandwich loaves to hamburger buns without any indication on labels that consumers might want to know. Families ate this bread daily, trusting that anything sold so widely must be perfectly safe. But laboratory studies eventually connected potassium bromate to cancer in animals, raising serious questions about what it might do inside human bodies over years of consumption. Many countries banned the additive entirely, though it remained legal in the United States under the assumption that proper baking destroyed most of the chemical. The debate continues today, with many bakers choosing bromate-free recipes to avoid even theoretical risk. That perfect golden crust carries a complicated history few people ever learned. Charity boxes as the source of holiday food was a reality that many families accepted with a mixture of gratitude and quiet shame. The boxes arrived a few days before Christmas, packed with canned goods, boxed stuffing, and sometimes a small frozen turkey wrapped in paper that hid its modest size. Children did not always understand where the food came from, only that suddenly the cupboards held more than they had the week before. Parents carried the weight of needing help, but they also carried the relief of knowing their children would eat well on Christmas morning. Some families returned year after year, while others needed help just once when illness or job loss stripped away their resources. The charity boxes came without judgment from church volunteers who understood that hard times visit everyone eventually. Children who grew up opening those boxes often became adults who filled them for others, completing a circle of generosity that defined what community truly means. Those charity Christmases taught that accepting help is not weakness, that giving and receiving are two sides of the same gift, and that kindness shared freely can transform the coldest season into something warm. Around to look at Christmas lights without seatbelts was one of those little joys that defined December nights in the 1970s. Families would load into the car after dinner, kids piling into laps or lying across the back seat while the heater hummed and the windows fogged just enough to need a little swipe with a sleeve. No one thought about rules or risks. It was about being together in that warm, rolling bubble, pointing out the biggest displays, the brightest reindeer, the houses where every inch twinkled like stars. Parents drove slowly, sometimes leaning out the window with one arm, sometimes steering with a confidence that only came from doing this every year of their lives. Today, though, not wearing a seatbelt is enough to get you pulled over before you reach the end of your street. Child safety laws turned what once felt natural into something unthinkable. But if you grew up in that era, you can still feel the vinyl seats beneath your hands, still hear your siblings shouting, still remember how safe it all felt before the world decided otherwise. Halloween lunchboxes in the 1950s, could someone look at a car ashtray and think, you know what this needs? A steak. Car ashtrays that doubled as mini grills were the ultimate gadget for the man on the go, or the man who just couldn't wait for dinner. Designed to plug into the car's cigarette lighter, these chrome curiosities promise to cook your meal while you cruise. Picture it. Dad behind the wheel, one hand on the steering column, the other turning a sizzling burger on the dashboard. The smell of gasoline, tobacco, and half-cooked beef filled the cabin like some dystopian roadside diner. It was marketed as the perfect road trip companion, ideal for busy executives and outdoorsmen on the move. Safety warnings were non-existent, because of course they were. One wrong turn and you weren't just flipping your lunch, you were flipping your car. Still, it captured everything Americans loved about the decade: convenience, confidence, and a reckless belief that anything could be improved with a little electricity. The ads boasted, "No smoke, no mess," which was a blatant lie. The only thing they didn't lie about was that you'd never go hungry again, just possibly unconscious from the fumes. By the end of the decade, fire departments everywhere had seen enough dashboard barbecue disasters to quietly retire the invention. But for a brief, glorious moment, the open road smelled like progress, bad decisions, and burnt hot dogs. And contaminated peanut butter sat in kitchen cabinets across the country during the 1980s, spreading invisibly onto sandwiches that children ate day after day. Aflatoxins are toxic compounds produced by mold that grows on peanuts, corn, and other crops, especially when storage conditions allow humidity to build. Back then, testing protocols were inconsistent, and contaminated batches slipped through quality control systems that had not yet caught up with the danger. Parents trusted peanut butter as wholesome protein, a lunchbox staple that kids loved and adults considered nutritious. Nobody examined jars for signs of contamination or questioned whether something so ordinary could carry real harm. But aflatoxins are among the most potent naturally occurring carcinogens known to science, capable of causing liver damage and cancer with repeated exposure. When outbreaks traced back to contaminated peanut products, regulators implemented strict testing requirements that transformed the industry. Today, peanut butter undergoes rigorous screening before reaching shelves. Those old jars represent an era when trust in familiar foods outweighed the caution we now know was always necessary. Potassium. Sleeping multiple children to one bed on Christmas Eve was how families stretched limited space and shared warmth during the coldest nights of the year. Brothers and sisters piled into a single mattress, arranging themselves like puzzle pieces until everyone fit beneath the same thin blankets. The body heat alone made the difference between shivering through the night and waking up comfortable enough to face Christmas morning. Children whispered secrets in the dark, wondering what Santa might bring, making promises to wake each other the moment the sun came up. Some beds sagged in the middle, pulling everyone toward the center in a tangle of elbows and knees that nobody minded because at least they were warm. Parents checked on them once or twice, adjusting covers and smoothing hair before retreating to their own cold corners of the house. The closeness created bonds that separate bedrooms never could, memories of giggles muffled under quilts and breath visible in the dim light of early morning. Those shared beds taught children that comfort comes from people, not possessions, and that the warmest place on the coldest night is always beside someone who loves you. Aluminum icicles with sharp, unfinished edges dangled from trees in the 1980s like frozen rain caught mid-fall, their metallic surfaces reflecting every color from surrounding lights. Families bought them in bulk, tossing handfuls onto branches until trees sparkled with that retro shimmer that felt quintessentially festive. Kids loved helping, grabbing fistfuls of thin metal strips and draping them anywhere they could reach. But these icicles were manufactured cheaply, stamped from aluminum sheets and packaged without any smoothing process. The edges remained razor-sharp, capable of slicing fingers with even gentle handling. Children often discovered this painfully, ending up with cuts that parents dismissed as minor holiday hazards. Beyond the cuts, these metal icicles conducted electricity if they fell across light strands or touched exposed wiring, creating shock risks nobody anticipated from simple decorations. When safety advocates documented injuries and electrical dangers, regulations required edge finishing or discontinuation. The sparkling icicles that once seemed like harmless festive additions became symbols of an era when safety standards lagged behind holiday enthusiasm. Kool-Aid packets for holiday punch lined the grocery aisle in rows of bright colors, each small envelope promising a full pitcher of sweetness for just a few cents. Families bought them by the dozen, mixing cherry with grape or orange with lemon to create signature blends that showed up at every holiday gathering throughout the season. The powder dissolved into tap water with a swirl of a wooden spoon, transforming something ordinary into something that looked almost festive when served in a glass bowl with ice cubes floating gently on top. Kids loved the bright colors and the sugar rush that followed every cup, completely unaware that the punch was standing in for sodas or juices that cost far more. Parents stirred in extra sugar to match the sweetness of store-bought drinks, and no one complained. The powder stained lips, fingers, and sometimes kitchen counters, but it also stained memories with something close to joy. Holiday punch made from Kool-Aid became a tradition in homes where creativity stretched further than cash, and the taste still triggers deep nostalgia for anyone who grew up watching that powder bloom into color. Imitate swaps with homemade alcohol were common during the 1970s, especially among adults who loved giving bottles of homemade wine, spiced rum, or boozy eggnog. It was a heartfelt gesture, something made with time and care that carried the spirit of the season. People laughed as they compared recipes, shared bottles after dinner, or kept them for Christmas Eve gatherings. Every bottle told a story of family traditions, of trial and error, of batches that turned out perfect, and batches that definitely did not. Sharing it felt like sharing a piece of your home, and receiving it felt like being invited into someone else's. No one worried about licensing or alcohol regulations. It was community, plain and simple. Today, though, giving or trading unlicensed alcohol is illegal in many states. The law sees risk where people once saw generosity, But for those who lived it, those clinking bottles remain part of Christmas memory, warm and unmistakably human. Asbestos oven mitts, tinfoil stars, and foil-wrapped cardboard ornaments were the sparkling solution for families who wanted their trees to shine without spending money on store-bought decorations. Mothers saved aluminum foil from whatever cooking required it, smoothing out wrinkled sheets and cutting them into shapes that caught every bit of light the room could offer. Cardboard from cereal boxes and shoe boxes became the foundation, cut into circles, stars, and bells before being wrapped carefully in the precious foil. Children helped press the metallic surface smooth, learning patience as they worked the material around curves and points without tearing. The finished ornaments hung from branches on loops of thread or bent paper clips, spinning slowly and reflecting the tree lights in tiny bursts of silver. Some families added touches of color by pressing crayon shavings between layers of wax paper, creating stained glass effects that glowed when backlit. Those handmade ornaments never looked like the perfect spheres in department store windows, but they carried something those factory-made decorations never could: the fingerprints and effort of the people who made them with love. Started with a yellow circle and 2 black dots, a simple smile drawn to brighten up a workplace. But by the 1970s, it had become something much bigger, everywhere, on everything. The smiley face was more than a logo. It was a feeling, a hope, a little sun on a pin. You saw it on buttons, t-shirts, lunchboxes, coffee mugs, and even wallpaper. It winked from notebooks and bumper stickers. It cheered up grocery bags. It followed you into stores and classrooms and dreams. It became the unofficial mascot of the 1970s. Cheery, slightly cheesy, and weirdly profound. But under the cheerfulness, there was something deeper, maybe even desperate. Because behind every exaggerated grin is a question. Do we really feel as good as we pretend? Maybe not. But wearing that face gave us permission to try. It reminded us that happiness could be a choice, or at least a style. It was optimism pinned to your chest. And in that decade, people needed it. Before you go, tell us in the comments which forgotten 80s memory hit you the hardest. Tap like if this trip back in time stirred something real, and subscribe so you never miss the next journey into the world we